Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Boomer Mill podcast. Today, we're going to go behind the scenes. What's going on next door? And we both literally did a little bit of research on an app called Nextdoor that we both use to determine what's going on event-wise, crime-wise, just news-wise in our community. And it's something that most people can download in the App Store and just keep track of what's going on in their neighborhood. Now, we identified 6 major events that happened in the last 2 weeks in our neighborhood, and we're going to be discussing those, as well as asking for your comments, opinions, and suggestions as to how we can improve our community and if this is happening in your neighborhood as well.
My name is Jonathan. I'm a boomer.
And my name is Michelle, and I'm a millennial, and together we're the Boomer Mill. Hey everyone, so welcome back to the Boomer Mill podcast. I'm Michelle, your millennial host, and here with me is my wonderful boomer husband, Jonathan. And if you are joining us from your favorite podcast platform and would like to see our faces, you can follow us on YouTube or Meta at the Boomer Mill. So please like, share, and subscribe as we are a brand new channel, and we'd love your support. And if you'd like to know more about what we do or have an idea for a show, please mention or visit theboomermill.live.
Hi folks, today we're going to go into some of the things that we're experiencing in our own local neighborhood, and the reason we're doing this is because I've been here for a minute, and the things that are going on in the neighborhood that we're living in, which is what I would consider to be a middle to upper class neighborhood in a very prestigious area near Seattle. I've known this neighborhood for over 30 years, and we lived here for just under 10 years. I've never seen the neighborhood like this, and it's happening very, very quickly. So we looked around and saw some things going on very publicly. It's not like we're going out with our cameras and shooting the news, but we're just taking what we see with our own eyes and what's reported on the news, and I'm comparing it in my mind to what used to go on here. And it is significantly different. So we're going to be talking about that. But the question is, what's happening where you are? Is this localized? Is it systemic? Or is it just, as we say every now and then, it's just our karma to be standing here when this happens?
And that said, we are going to issue a trigger warning. So please note that some of the crimes that have happened in our area in the past 2 weeks may be inappropriate for some viewers. So please take note before watching our video. If you feel triggered, take a break if necessary. So we use an app called Nextdoor, which I mentioned a little earlier, and our police and fire also use it to keep us informed about what's going on. And we're going to share some of our thoughts and a few news stories that came out in the last week. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Evan, the owner of a Redmond cannabis shop, is pushing for answers after another smash and grab robbery at his establishment. The owner says it's the 5th time it's happened in just 13 months. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eric Thomas. Cairo 7's Madeline Audley is live outside #cannabis. And Madeline, this whole thing was caught on camera.
Right. This happened early on Thursday. You can see the proof of it here behind me. The thieves were able to back a car right here into this wall, smashing through this boarded up window and wall section that you can see right before us. The owner here tells me that he feels powerless to prevent something like this from happening because of city regulations that prevent him from installing some permanent infrastructure that he feels would help.
It's a very unsettling feeling to just feel vulnerable all the time.
Right up the sidewalk and through the windows, still boarded up from another robbery a few weeks back.
This is the 5th time this has happened.
8 or 9 people swarm inside. There's no cash and most of the product is locked away.
The amount of product they steal is like tiny compared to the property damage.
Logan Bowers has shops in Seattle and Everett, but only Redmond gets hit. His only shop without bollards out front.
The city won't let us place anything on this side to protect us.
A city spokesman says city code doesn't allow bollards, and on this side of hashtag, the city's got right of way right up to the wall. Bowers could install them on this side, but only on his property.
This is absurd. Like, businesses should be allowed to protect themselves and prevent crime.
He put up these temporary blocks, but he says he won't have the space for a solution long term.
There's a pretty high chance we'll go out of business. I mean, you can't take 5 cars a year into a building and expect to still be here.
Now, Bowers estimates the property damage cost alone from one of these smash and grab robberies cost them about $30,000. The city, meanwhile, says they have been meeting with the owners here, offering them safety and security tips, but they are just not sure if the business has complied. For now, reporting live in Redmond, Madeline Ottilie, Cairo 7 News.
Now, we're seeing this happening in retail establishments up and down I-5, which is the interstate that runs through Washington, Oregon, and California. In fact, every time we go to the grocery store, someone is running out with a full cart with the alarms blaring and almost nothing happens.
Yeah, the shop that this is happening at, and again, I want to stress, this is the 5th time in under a year using the same method. They steal a car and drive it into the building. And fortunately, they do this when the shop is closed. They're not armed robbers, they're driving robbers. But the idea that the same shop in, again, a prestigious upper-class neighborhood is being targeted because the city won't allow them to protect themselves with a giant piece of steel, which they would pay for, and it wouldn't obstruct traffic and pedestrians could just walk around it. That's not being allowed because of some regulation, legislation somewhere. This shop is a local establishment. It is a benefit to the local community. There are a lot of people that are using cannabis medically now. It's not just, listen, I was a hippie. I go back that far. It was bad news back in my day. Today, it's a medical treatment. People are coming there for medical treatment. And, we've visited the store. The people are helpful. They're friendly. They'll give you suggestions. And they're going to have to leave because the police won't do anything and they won't allow this business to do something that would essentially prevent this from happening again. Is this happening in your neighborhood?
Well, I remember that during COVID, there was a big article that came out about the Home Depot in our area, and they lost almost $1 million in theft just by people walking in and out with stuff. So they linked a lot of the theft to licensed and unlicensed road contractors. And they were just taking whole sections of like wood and pallets, tools, and anything that they needed and walking out of the store with them. And they eventually caught some of the people and were able to apprehend them, but it had been going on for years. So, we're seeing whole sections of our malls, our strip malls, they're closed off, they're boarded up, especially around the holidays, because that's when we see cars going through all of the windows. And I remember at Christmas time last year in the Victoria area, whole sections were boarded up because people were going through with cars and just filling up their stolen cars full of stuff for resale. So, and then we also found, when we followed up on some of these stories with the news, that many of the items are then identified online via Amazon, or they're sold at pawn shops, and then maybe the people can maybe get their stuff back. So, and that also, we also have porch pirates as well, which is a whole other thing that's going on in our area. So Jonathan and I have to get a P.O. box, protect our mail, things like that. So is there anything else you want to add to?
Well, it sort of looks like the car is the new gun.
Wow, good point. All right, so speaking of mail theft, we're going to go ahead and go into the next story, which is a major issue around here.
And one property manager who runs this apartment building here in Magnolia and 22 others across the city of Seattle says he's been urging his tenants to check their mailboxes most every day because they're seeing a rise in mail theft from people who are breaking in.
Take a look at this blue-haired suspect.
It's a violation and it's very unsettling for a lot of people.
You can see he pulls a tool out of his pocket.
Basically like a pair of pliers, but they can open wide, and they just really strong-armed the doorknob, which was locked.
It's 2:30 in the morning. Eventually, he's able to break the lock to get in. His first stop? The mail room.
There was a piece of mail there. He instantly took that.
And he later grabs the other piece of loose mail. Mail thefts, this property manager says, have been a recurring problem recently in the 22 apartment buildings he runs across Seattle.
They'll be hitting the same exact night. And it's not even just like Christmas. It's all year round. We get mailbox break-ins. They'll take a pry device. They'll rip the United States Post Office or Postmaster's key, and the whole entire cage opens.
So he's investing in security.
We now have a doorknob cover. This is another anti-theft device.
As repairs
Easily a $6,000 replacement job.
are getting pricey.
It's a constant. It's just, it happens all the time.
We know what you're doing.
I sat down with the USPS postal inspector who says we're seeing a rise in mail theft locally.
People aren't after the card, the birthday card that grandma's sending you. They're after the birthday card that grandma's sending you that also has a check in it. Or they're after your bank statement that may have a new credit card that they can go use.
So USPS is investing in security
Different locking systems that are being upgraded.
and is asking you to help protect your mail by emptying your mailbox more frequently, because the longer it's there,
The more opportunity it gives for somebody to steal.
So let's talk about the mail theft that's on the rise, especially just before an election. And this is a little more personal for Jonathan and I, because we've had our ability to vote taken away because of a new statute that was proposed by King County. I'm going to go ahead and read you a letter that we received from Daniel T. Satterberg, prosecuting attorney. King County voter. King County Elections recently reviewed your voter registration record and noted that you appear to be registered to vote in an address that is not a valid residence as required by state law. The elections director sent you 2 letters requesting that you confirm your residential address. Having received no response, she referred the matter to this office. State law requires that your residential address for voter registration purposes be the address where you physically reside. There are some exemptions listed in RCW, the reverse side of this letter, but it is not permissible to use the address of a mailbox facility, a storage facility, or any other business as your residential address if you do not reside there, even if you receive mail at that address. Now, I'm part of a domestic violence protection program, and we get our mail stolen in our complex all the time. So we use a P.O. box for safety reasons, and they're a lot less likely to get broken into. So what's your take on this, Jonathan?
Well, again, we have a private mailbox and we have a residential mailbox. The residential mailboxes are not secured at all.
They're out in the open.
They're out in the weather. There's a little shed over each one, and there are about 5 of them in this apartment complex, which is fairly large.
And it's open and ungated.
And it's on a bus line.
Yeah, next to the freeway.
Next to the freeway. So maybe, to refer back to the pot shop, maybe they'll start taking cars and ramming them into the mailboxes to take the mail out, because actually you wouldn't have to do that. I could do it easily with a screwdriver, just looking at, the security that's available, which is not much. So the idea that we have to use our actual address, and there are several reasons why we would not want to do that, one of them being the protection, is it's more than inconvenient. It's taking away one of the reasons that this country is what it is. You have to be able to vote. You have to be able to have a voice. You have to be able to speak that voice. And because of some bureaucratic decision at the county level, we have been silenced. And I wonder how many other people, for security or privacy or just personal reasons, have used the mailbox, private mailbox, as their primary mailing address. Mm-hmm. And they're all getting these letters just before the election.
So I'm going to also mention another story that I read on Nextdoor, and this was a little intense. There's a really nice area called The Ridge in our area, and there was a guy who literally was breaking into these large mailing centers in these gated communities and stealing their mail and their identities. And so they got a neighborhood task force together. They identified the guy. They reported him to the police. They got him on camera. And they got a letter from the county saying that they determined that the action was decriminalized and said that their hands were tied and they couldn't do anything. So the guy came back with welding equipment and opened up the entire backs of the mail center and stole everything. And no one appeared to do anything about it. So that was another extreme case that I read a couple of months ago on Nextdoor. And I thought that was jarring. I mean, imagine that you're living in an affluent community and you can't secure your mail because the city has determined that it's a decriminalized action. So that's just more of the stuff that we're kind of dealing with in our neighborhood. And I am curious to see if you guys are dealing with a lot of mail theft, porch pirates, things like that, those nature.
Seniors beware in Bellevue and now beyond.
We don't want people to be paranoid, but we want people to be vigilant, be aware of their surroundings.
Major Mark Tarantino and the Bellevue PD hoping to track down a younger couple that's been targeting the elderly for their jewelry.
Trying to rip them off, using distraction techniques to get their attention, get close to them, and either handshake them or hug them, and using that opportunity to steal jewelry.
Police are looking for these vehicles. They say both have been used in street thefts. On June 17th, a 68-year-old woman and 78-year-old man were stopped at the corner of Northeast 2nd Place and 108th Avenue. Police say the suspects got out of a black vehicle and asked the older couple for directions when the young woman gave the elderly woman a hug in gratitude, only to unzip her jacket and rip off her gold necklace. Same type of thing 2 days later at Northeast 2nd Street and 124th Avenue, this time stealing a 71-year-old woman's Rolex. Finally, this past Tuesday, a 91-year-old man targeted as he checked his mail on Southeast 44th Street. Another Rolex swiped off a victim's wrist. The message from Bellevue Police, don't let your guard down.
Calling 911 and make sure that everything's okay, then be the victim of a crime.
Take one more good look at the vehicles. Cops hoping someone recognizes them, can connect them to a younger couple, and put an end to their spree. And just this morning, we got word of essentially the same thing happening up in Bellingham. They used a little bit different tactic in this situation, offering costume jewelry as a token of thanks, an effort to get even closer to their victims before, again, they swiped the jewelry. Bellevue police tell me the same vehicle was used in that attack. Live in Bellevue, Jim Nelson, King 5 News.
So seniors getting mugged is the most common post that I see on Nextdoor. And it appears to be a couple that's doing it up and down I-5. The police know who they are. So what's your take on that, Jonathan?
This is a bit like going into the apartment building and cutting the boxes open. It's considered a sort of a low-grade crime, although these people are being confronted on the street. It's not somebody sneaks into the building at night and tears open your mailbox. They're coming right up to you. Mm-hmm. If they were hitting the people, that would be assault, but they're not hitting the people, they're deceiving the people.
And we've stopped at more than one intersection and had people try to get into our car while we were driving it. So that's another thing that we're noticing as well.
Yeah. So and actually we don't live that far from the area where the report came from. My dentist is not that far from where this report comes from, and I see people sort of eyeing me strangely as I'm going from the parking area into the buildings when we do go to that area. And it's obvious that they're not that interested really in coming up and saying, hey, don't I know you from Rotary Club or something? Yeah. No, they're looking to see what kind of watch I'm wearing. They're looking to see if I have any jewelry, or maybe my jacket is really valuable. So it's pretty widespread.
And we don't wear jewelry when we go out anymore. And we also don't wear nice shoes, because more than one occasion, just the intersection down from our apartment, people have literally had their shoes taken off their feet while on walks by muggers. Like, they take your shoes, they take your wallet, they take any jewelry that you're using, and the police give you a report and say, this is for your insurance, which doesn't pay anything. So we basically try to look as ramshackle as possible when we go outside, and I put my jewelry on for the show and you guys, but other than that, I can't go out looking nice anymore, which I consider to be sad, to be honest with you. So we had another incident happen in our apartment complex where a guy came up and he was trying to sell Bibles from door to door, and we have a no soliciting ordinance in our complex, and one of our neighbors said, hey, you're not allowed to do that here, and could you please take that somewhere else. They got into a violent confrontation. The guy ended up pulling the fire alarm, and the police and fire ended up first thing in the morning at our complex, and it was really jarring for us and our little dog Rosie, and it's just, it doesn't feel safe. Another thing we had to do was we put a club on our little Honda, because a lot of the cars in our parking lot are not only getting broken into and used in crimes to break through windows, but they're also being used to sleep in. And you can tell because when you come back to your car, it's been completely trashed. It looks like someone has been maybe doing drugs in there or something like that, because we are an unsecured area. And So that's another thing that we're dealing with. And then another post that I saw on Nextdoor was really, really interesting. It was a woman who claimed to be a young blonde woman, and she said she answered the door, and there were a couple of people standing there, and they said, first thing, "You're not Asian." And she goes, "No, I'm blonde." And they went, "Where are your Asian neighbors?" And she went, "Excuse me?" And they actually told her why they were looking for her Asian neighbors. And she put this on Nextdoor. And they were looking for safes. They were looking for jewelry. They were looking for bullion, things that you can't get in a bank. So she goes, they were so in my face with this. Like, I answered the door and they told me why they were there. It was to steal from my neighbors. And so she put it on Nextdoor. She did tell the police about it. But it was like, oh, be diligent. Be careful, was what we were told. So there's that. We also have another neighbor that we came across. This is the neighbor with the dog, and he has the art studio. You want to tell him about that, Jonathan?
Oh, yeah. He had, I think he still has it, but he's an artist by profession, and they're quite successful, and he does private commissions, and he's fairly well known in the area. And but he lives near where we live. It's just a couple of blocks away. Mm-hmm. And, our dogs communicate with each other for a while, and we're chatting with the guy. And he said that he was selling his studio that he'd had for, I don't know, somewhere between 15 and 20 years, and moving everything to this location, east of Seattle. And we thought, I thought, being a former real estate agent, you're probably going to clean up with the price you're going to get over there. And he said, no, price has nothing to do with it. It's not safe. Mm-hmm. I don't believe I'm safe when I'm over there working, although it's a secured building. There are people running around in it. They come in at night. They run amok. They do whatever they want. I don't feel safe. My artwork, which is valuable, is not safe. And I've had it. And
this is a burly guy. This is a tall, big dude. So I looked at that and went, okay, if they're not intimidated by you, what about the rest of us?
We don't have a chance.
Yeah. So we're here to kind of address that unmitigated crime aspect that we're seeing in our city, and we're wondering if you see it in yours. So let's go into property values in our area and what we're seeing there and how it's being discussed on Nextdoor. Let's take a look.
Homeowners across King County shelling out more money in property taxes this year.
It was gradually making it more and more difficult for me to stay there.
Winona Graham says property taxes in King County have been creeping up for years. Her home in Sammamish was paid off, but she says her taxes nearly doubled in the last 6 years.
Because I couldn't afford to live there on a teacher salary. It was just too much. And so I had no choice but to move.
Graham moved from her home in Sammamish to Maple Valley.
It's very sad. We lived in the community for over 30 years.
That could be the reality for even more people in King County. The King County tax assessor says aggregate property values went up more than 21% last year. But because it operates on a budget-based system, property taxes are going up 6.4%.
We're getting priced out of where we live. Where we've lived for a very long time, and it's not just me, it's a lot of other people.
People like Ron Farrell, who's lived in his home for nearly 2 decades.
We've seen the increase in the taxes rise about 4 times the value of what it was when we moved in.
Farrell isn't working for health reasons, and with a son in college is looking at other states after living here nearly all his life.
My family was here. I created a family here. My friends are here, but this state, we're taxing so much that it doesn't make sense for some of us.
The county tax assessor says voter-approved levies are largely the reason for the increase. The county shows that a large chunk of this year's property taxes will go to local schools and state schools.
So over time, people are going to get more and more frustrated with having to pay the taxes, and then that's going to impact the schools, which aren't funded as well as they should be by the state anyway.
In King County, Julie Calhoun, King 5 News.
Okay, so now let's go into why property values are skyrocketing, at least in our area. So to put what's going on into perspective, let's do some super simple math. So let's say last year your condo was worth $500,000 according to a county assessment. And according to the King County assessor, the county's aggregate property tax in 2022 here increased by 3% and another 6.4% in 2023. Largely, it was city-supported and approved levies were the reason for the increase. So that's a total of 9.4% in just 2 years to levies, and then you have over 20% added to your property value. So home values increased 21.8% in 2022, and that brings the condo's value up to $609,000. In addition to the levies, you are paying through the teeth. So seniors can, I did look into this, seniors can take a tax abatement, but then that sucks all the money out of their property once they sell or pass away. So if they have any children or family members or various nonprofits that they plan on giving their property away to, most of it is going to be drained of taxes by the time they pass or they move to a senior living facility. And they will be limited in that senior living facility because they can only sell their house for X. So we're not seeing housing improvements outside of these tiny little studios for crazy money that we're seeing go up. And we're paying twice as much as we paid in rent less than a decade ago. And salaries have not followed that trend. So Jonathan, you're a real estate expert. What is your take on this?
Well, I was a real estate broker for over 20 years in a community just south of here. And I sold properties in this area, and I've sold properties in that area. Mm-hmm. I've also been on a government council, a city council, that would have some say in what the city of Seattle is doing. When you raise taxes, you don't just check a box and the taxes go up. You have to, sometimes it has to be on the ballot. And it's very common for people to look at that, and the excuse is, as Michelle said, look how much your house is worth now. Wow, your $250,000 house that you bought it for is now worth $700,000.
That's over a longer period of time. Yeah. But 2022 to now, it's over 20%. And that's a lot for someone on a fixed income.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a little more than misleading to say, look how much your property value is going to be without pointing out, and look how much it's going to cost you, either now or when you sell it. And there's some abatements and things that you can get, but not when you have over 20% in 1 year.
Yeah.
That I thought that there was a misprint when I read it.
No. I went online and looked it up because I thought it was, I'm like, did they mean like 2.18 or no, 21.8? I mean, that's a lot of taxes.
Yeah.
And then they had the levies go through. So that's a 9.4% increase there.
And this is at the same time that Seattle is also hit with thousands and thousands of complaints for lack of services.
Yeah.
The streets are falling apart. The street lights are, not operating.
The drug crisis is insane.
Drug crisis is everywhere. There's no neighborhood in Seattle that is unaffected. The high-end, billionaire mansion areas also are hit by swarms of people just going through and taking anything that's not bolted down, or taking their car and driving it into a pot shop. Mm-hmm. So this is a way for the county to raise money on some people without raising it on everyone.
Yeah.
They need a general tax increase, but they don't want to do that. And the reason they don't want to do that is because they're elected officials. Mm. And they would be then standing there during the election, and their opponent would say, this person just raised your taxes by X thousands of dollars. So they're trying to sneak it on the ballot.
Well, and you actually served on city council and you worked with the police and things like that. So Jonathan, he's also been in real estate for decades. So he has a very clear view into what's being done here. And are you a fan or no?
Absolutely not. The city needs to raise money, sure. They don't need to raise it on the backs of the people who have been supporting the city for decades. They need to cut costs. They need to optimize their service provision. And they need to probably get rid of some staff that have been there for years and years and years and years. Mm-hmm. Whole departments that are just useless nowadays.
Okay, well, thank you for that insight, sweetie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do a little warning here. The next story we're going to show you, we did confirm via the police and the blotter and their records, okay? But it will be disturbing to some audiences, okay? So if you're triggered, take a break. If you have children in the home, maybe watch this part later, okay? Here we go.
Earlier this week here at Juanita Beach, people started calling 911 saying an unconscious woman was being raped by a man. They didn't step in to stop it, but they did stay on the phone with 911 until police got here, showing up around the time the man finished. They then took him into custody and have found out that he has a long criminal history of domestic violence, assault, as well as violating temporary protection orders. Here's what police say happened that day.
When police arrived, they found the suspect, 52-year-old Vincent Mulrooney, getting up off the woman and pulling his sweatpants up, while hers were pulled down to her thighs and she appeared unconscious. They were found between some cars and a trash can. Bystanders pointed in the direction, but as I mentioned, no one had stepped in. The male was taken into custody by the bathroom, and a witness stated that it was, quote, 1,000% him. Upon more investigation, Kirkland PD believes they may have arrived together but not known each other for very long. Both had been drinking. A witness said the female appeared unable to move during the attack but made some audible noises. There were more descriptive accounts that helped build the case against Mulrooney, though they were too graphic for here and can be found in the probable cause docs on my RIFC account. A background check of Mulrooney has connected him to multiple domestic violence cases and protection order violations in the past, none of which appear to connect to the woman in this case. Investigators say this victim was not coherent enough to make much of a statement, let alone give consent, and she was transported to a local hospital. Mulrooney waived his first appearance and was charged today. I'll be following this one going.
Okay, so that was rough. As you just heard, a woman was openly attacked and raped by a man in broad daylight at our local park. This is a block from where we live. Onlookers did eventually call 911, and the police showed up, waited for the man to finish before taking him into custody. Now, he has a long history of priors, just like my abusers do, including domestic violence, and in our direct experience, we're guessing that he might be let off the hook again, because if you look at this guy's record, it's effing scary. So, as you guys know, I am a domestic violence survivor. I am also a survivor of sexual assault and rape as both a child, a teenager, and an adult. So, when I was going to university and I was an RA, I found that it was 3 guys on campus that were doing all of the assaulting. Okay. I knew who they were. I reported them regularly, but because they came from highly affluent, well-to-do families, the main guys passed away, thank you God, because he was a horrible, horrible human being. They were serial assaulters. They would do this every single weekend. So, and Jonathan actually lived next door to the university that I attended, and you could hear the screams at night. So if you don't hold these individuals accountable, they will continue to serial commit these crimes. They will not stop unless someone physically stops them. I'm coming from the experience as a victim here. They will literally put us into hiding and let the guys go. That's something I have never ever understood, and I still don't understand to this day. And when I was staying at the YWCA, that was their experience down the line. Every single woman there had to be put into hiding because they wouldn't take the husbands, the boyfriends, or the family members that were sexually assaulting them and abusing their children and doing horrible crimes against them. They wouldn't hold them accountable. So if there's no enforcement for these crimes, we're essentially telling these monsters that this is their playground. Come and have fun with the children and the women. I've listened to many women who are in my situation, and it was police enforcement that kept their insanely abusive husbands from eventually killing them and their children. I've also seen a lot of addiction linked to perpetrators. My attackers were all covert addicts of some kind, and that's another thing that's not really being addressed in our area. So if we take away the ability for women, children, and other people to escape abuse, we're no better than places like North Korea or terrorist organizations. And in my opinion, dictatorships rely on strong men to enforce rather than to provide basic necessities or services to their populations. And their goal is to suck out all of the resources, and the abusers on the streets and homes are like an insurance policy for what they've looted out of the economy. So if we allow this to continue, I fear that we will become a more autocratic, dictatorial area that is being run by brutes. What's your take, Jonathan?
Well, in this particular instance, and there were several reports about this.
And we looked at the police report too,
Yeah.
and they confirmed that this happened. And they also said that they came as the guy was finishing. So that was their approach.
That was their approach. The eyewitness accounts indicate, and this is, for me, this is the sticking point.
We live
for
across the
whatever
street.
reason.
That's how we
Yeah.
kind of have a little insider view of
They
this.
report that the police arrived and waited for the man to finish. I don't know how that's possible. I simply don't know how it's possible. I'm just going to let that hang there. You can make your own judgment on whether you think a sworn officer of the law should wait for someone to finish committing a vile, antisocial, and certainly illegal action. The previous report was a little different. He also, kind of mentioned that, but all the written reports that I've read indicated the police arrived and they literally waited for him to get off the woman before they approached him. I don't know a single member in my family that was a police officer that wouldn't have run up, grabbed this guy, and ripped him off the woman that he was assaulting.
Now, we were working when this happened, and we weren't there, but I would have at least taken a rock to the back of his head. That's me. And if I weren't armed. So I would have tried to do something. I wouldn't have allowed him to continue that. And this was in a park full of children, families, groups of people, broad daylight.
Yeah. This is a beautiful park on the edge of a beautiful lake in a beautiful neighborhood. I mean, there are swings and there's plenty of parking. There are walking trails. There are even, you can rent a boat, rent a kayak and go out. You can wade out into the water. Yeah. And this guy is using that for his little rape pool. And they waited for him to finish.
All right. So if you're still with us, we have one more story that we're going to cover. And we're going to talk about a mass shooting that occurred on Interstate 5, which is called I-5, and it runs between basically the entire west coast of the United States. It connects all, Washington, Oregon, and California. And we had a mass shooting. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that.
Now to a terrifying shooting spree on a major interstate, the second in less than a year along the same highway. One victim is describing how bullets tore through his car, nearly hitting his wife and kids. A suspect is now in custody after a shooting spree along a Seattle area highway. Vehicles apparently targeted at random. At least 7 shootings in all, with at least 6 people shot.
It should be alarming to everybody.
Police receiving multiple calls Monday night describing a driver in a white Volvo shooting at cars on Interstate 5.
It didn't hit my child, thank God. And the bullet landed right there.
One victim staying anonymous, saying he was driving with his wife and 2 young kids when bullets came flying through the passenger side of the car, narrowly missing his kids who were in the back seat.
The one that really hit me was this one, obviously my son, and then this right here, because it was like, damn, so close. But thank God, man.
Another bullet came flying through the passenger window, traveling through the windshield, barely missing both parents.
As you can see, it came really, really close to my wife's face. She had some glass in her eye.
Lay all the way down on the ground. Police arrested the alleged shooter after finding a car matching the white Volvo near one of the shooting scenes. Authorities have yet to identify the suspect, who's due in court today. Last year, police arrested another suspect for randomly shooting at vehicles on the same highway. That suspect claimed a meth-induced paranoia fueled his violence. As for the latest shooting spree, 2 victims are still hospitalized, one in critical condition.
So now we're getting mass shootings on I-5. And according to our research, we saw a higher average of mass shootings per week in our area. And we're wondering if this is what you're experiencing in your neighborhood as well. Now, a new quarterly report by the King County Prosecutor's Office shows that 73 people were murdered with a gun in King County this year, and another 283 people have been injured. That's compared to 69 people during COVID, when we had a lot of violence in our cities. And 268 total hurt. So we're up from when we were in the lockdown, which is very concerning. We've also had to call 911 quite a few times just in the last couple of months. Do you want to share some of our experiences, honey?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is that we were out at night. It wasn't really late, it wasn't really early, but it was night, and we were walking our dog through a neighborhood that we walked in probably 150 times before. We know the area, it's very safe. We weren't concerned about, getting anybody rushing up on us with a gun or anything. But, we're always cautious. And we were crossing the street from one park to another small park. And we were about halfway across the street when I noticed a car ripping toward us at a really high rate of speed for that part of the town. I mean, he'd come out of a stoplight less than a block away, and he was already doing over 40. And so we scurried and got out of the way and got his license plate as he screamed around the corner.
Well, and my knee in the front of my leg hit the front of his car. And so I was literally knocked back. I mean, and I'm a marathon runner, guys, and I'm also an athlete. So if I were an elderly person, this guy would have flipped me. And so we called 911 and they said, okay, are you on the ground? And I said, no, he barely missed me, but there are other people standing with us at the intersection that are prepared to offer a report when the police come, because I don't know if he was drunk or high or just crazy, but he was driving like a maniac and he almost hit a whole group of people even after us. And so we went ahead and we reported it, and she said, did he flip you? And I go, excuse me, what? And she goes, did he flip you? Are you on the ground? Are you bleeding? And I said, no, ma'am, he did not flip us, but I gave him the full license plate number. I gave a description of the driver, and she said, okay, well, he didn't flip you. And that ended the call. And I found that to be extremely concerning, given the fact that he almost killed us and other people. And if I had been an older person trying to cross the street, he would have killed me, guaranteed. So what are your thoughts on this, Jonathan?
Well, we don't really need anybody sitting on a telephone making a note, couple almost killed at the corner of 1st and 2nd. We need people in vehicles patrolling at night, particularly, who can be dispatched when a call like that comes in, because he went around the corner so fast he almost lost control of the car.
Yeah.
And the area that he was driving toward
was very, very populated.
Very, very popular. It's the heart of town. We were kind of on the edge of town. He was going into the heart of where all the people would be located. And their question was basically, do we have to send an ambulance?
Yeah.
Rather than which direction was he traveling? I'm saying they're trying to figure out, was that east or northeast? They didn't ask that question.
No.
They just said, what did the car look like? Did you get the license plate? Okay. And did he flip you?
Actually, she didn't ask for a license plate. I offered that information. I remember I kept saying it over and over again after, because I was so freaked out. I wasn't sure if I just sprained my leg or if it was anything worse. And I was kind of in shock, but I just kept saying the license plate number over and over and over again so they wouldn't forget it, hoping that they could stop this guy before he killed somebody that night. I mean, I was really lucky. And the people behind me, luckily, because I'm the runner, they were not affected, but they saw it happen. And it was scary. It was not fun. Now, I will say that we did call 911 last week, and this was because we were on our nightly walk with Rosie for her final potty, and we found a semi-conscious young male who was clearly having some kind of an overdose on the sidewalk a couple of blocks from our apartment. And so I called 911. They came within like 2 minutes. It was really impressive. And they got him off the ground. They knew his name. They called him by name. They asked him if he was okay. And it was really well done. And I was very impressed. But they knew his name. And they said, and she said, you scared the people again. You scared the people again. You have to stop doing this. You're scaring people. And I'm thinking, so this is someone who's known to do this on a nightly basis. Riding their electronic bike, or aka motorcycle, on the sidewalk and falling over from a fentanyl overdose. This is just something they do. How is that not being dealt with in this area? So that was another one. Unfortunately, we also have, in the Overlook area, there are a lot of things on Nextdoor where people's dogs, cats, and animals are being slaughtered and put in garbage bags. So that's another thing that's coming about, where we think we might have a serial killer or, something like that in the area, because it seems to be very consistent with one person's motivation. So I guess the whole point I'm trying to make here is that I noticed this when I was going to college. There were usually, because I was an RA, I was a Greek house coordinator, I was basically in charge of housing because I was a scholarship kid. I needed to earn in order to get my degrees. So one thing that I noticed while I was enforcing a lot of the statutes and regulations at the university was it was normally only 2 or 3 people who were doing all of the damage. And there were hundreds of victims. So unless they get a hold of those 2 to 3, sometimes 4 people on a lark, that it's going to keep happening. And the people doing this are usually serial offenders. So we're not attaching this to immigration. We're not attaching this to the generations, because we're finding that these crimes are happening at all ages. We're not attaching it to race. We're not attaching it to voting demographic or political opinions. We're literally basing this off of a complete and total lack of enforcement that we're seeing in our area. And we're wondering if you're seeing it in yours, because that's what our first video was all about. Jonathan lost his house in retirement to crime. He never got to collect on it. I lost my businesses to crime. I never got to collect on it. Why? Because there's no enforcement for local residents. So, I can go into further stuff that we're seeing. There's a lot of TikTok racing videos coming out. You can see all of the wheelies in the intersections in the downtown area every single night. They are usually accompanied with gunfire. A couple of kids died in the last one that they had. They were shot. Some get run over. And there's not a lot of mitigation for this. So what do you take from this, Jonathan? Do you see how can we improve? How can we be better?
That is a conundrum. Again, I've been involved in neighborhood policy and neighborhood support and neighborhood councils and city councils and supporting the police for decades. And I have to say, I have never seen a decline like this quickly, this far. I haven't lost hope, because I've seen declines and I've seen recoveries. What I don't see is response. I call it enforcement, call it whatever you want. There has to be a response. When the criminals are banging at your door, pushing in, you have to push back. And the authorities know this. The police know this. Everybody knows this. You don't want somebody in your house, push them out. They're not being pushed out, and they're getting farther and farther and farther. And they need to be stopped.
And that reminds me of something else I saw next door. There's a pest control company, and these guys are going on these little mono wheels, and they're coming up to people's houses and pushing their way in. And they target elderly people in nice areas. So that's another thing that we're reading. So when is this going to stop? Is it going to stop? Are people just going to move out of the country? We don't know. But we would love to hear your comments, your suggestions. If any of you work in city management, if you're a psychologist and can maybe kind of parcel this out. Does it have to do with the lockdowns and COVID? Does it have to do with the unmitigated corporate allowances? Does it have to do with the fact that establishments might be profiting off of the crime? I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like it to us. So we would love your input and your follow, and we'd also love some suggestions for the next show, because we're constantly looking for new ideas that are going to be helpful for you moving forward. So our main goal is to bridge the gap between the generations, one conversation at a time. And we hope that you found this video helpful and not too, what's the word I'm looking for? Triggering. Yeah.
We recognize there's a lot of bad stuff here, but you have to know about the bad stuff, because if you don't know about the bad stuff, you're not going to see it coming. And trust me, we all need to see it coming. This is not isolated. Again, Nextdoor is nationwide, and you can get on there and just throw a dart at a map and go to that location, and you'll find a lot of this stuff is going on. On the other hand, if you live in an idyllic community, you know, with country and fresh air and fresh water and bunnies running around free, let us know that too. I mean, we're not adverse to good news. It's just that right now it's hard to find. So if you have some good news, let us have it. We could all use it.
Oh. And with that, we're sending you all peace as we navigate this interesting time that we find ourselves in. And we encourage you just to subscribe. So thank you so much for following us. And we're sending you, again, peace. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.